All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a topic that's super relevant to a lot of us, I think, Islamic finance.
No, definitely.
We're going to be exploring how Islam views money and wealth, especially in today's world.
Yeah.
Our source for this deep dive is a really interesting conversation between a Muslim scholar and somebody who was asking him questions about this topic.
Yeah, a lot of really insightful questions, really practical.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really excited to kind of unpack some of these things. I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in like the day-to-day of paying bills and investing and all these things.
Right.
But we don't often take a step back and think about, okay, what's the bigger picture here?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I want to start with a question that might seem kind of basic, but I think it's really important to grapple with. Is money even real?
Yeah, that's a great question. On the one hand, the Quran recognizes wealth. It even uses a specific term for it.
Mal, right?
No, right. So it acknowledges it as something real, as something that can be a potential adornment in this world. But it can also be a test.
Right.
And this is where I think things get really interesting when we start to talk about money in today's context.
Yeah.
What is money? What is this stuff that we're using every day?
Especially now, right? I mean, is it like these pieces of paper? Is it the numbers in our bank account? Like, it feels kind of made up sometimes.
Right, absolutely. And, the conversation we're looking at gets into how before 1971, the U.S. dollar was pegged to gold, so there was something tangible backing
Right,
it.
something real.
Something real, right. But then they moved away from that and went to this fractional reserve system, which is essentially money creation through debt.
Okay, so my money
Right.
represents someone else's debt. That's kind of trippy.
Yeah, it's a really interesting system. Essentially, banks are allowed to lend out more money than they actually have in reserves. Yeah. So that creates more and more debt, right? And so it really makes you question, like, what does this mean for our understanding of Mao?
Yeah, that's a huge question. So we've got this like ancient concept of wealth, this mal, kind of like bumping up against this modern system where money is this electronic debt.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of leads to another big question, right? Why should any of this matter spiritually?
Yeah, absolutely. And the source uses this analogy of money as a magnifying glass. It doesn't change who you are, but it amplifies what's already in your heart.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
So if someone's already inclined towards like generosity and charity, having wealth could potentially allow them to do even more good in the world.
Exactly.
But if someone's like more prone to greed.
Yeah. Then it could magnify those tendencies as well.
Yeah.
And the Quran's very clear on this, that wealth and children will only benefit those who come to Allah with a pure heart.
So it's really all about intention then, right? It's not that money itself is good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's about what you do with it and how you approach it.
It's recognizing that it can be used for both good and bad, but making sure our financial decisions are aligned with our spiritual values.
Okay, so that leads us to a really practical challenge, right? Halal finance, mortgages, loans, investments, all those things. How do we navigate that world when we're trying to live by Islamic principles?
Yeah.
Let's talk about riba for starters.
Yeah, absolutely. Riba interest, is strictly forbidden in Islam, and that creates a lot of challenges in our current system.
Yeah.
Where interest is so deeply embedded. So, like you were saying, how do you get a mortgage? How do you buy a house?
Right. I mean, for most people, it's impossible to buy a house without a mortgage.
Yeah.
So what's the solution?
So the conversation talks about a couple of different models that are used for Islamic mortgages. One is called murabaha, and in this model, the bank buys the property and then sells it to you at a fixed profit margin.
Okay, so no fluctuating interest rates, just a set profit that's agreed upon up front.
Exactly. Another model is diminishing musharaka, and this is based on co-ownership. So you and the bank actually buy the house together. And as you make payments, your ownership share increases while the bank's decreases.
It's almost like the bank becomes like your partner in home ownership then.
Exactly.
Rather than like this lender that you owe money to. I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting approach. But what's even more interesting is that even within Islamic scholarship, there's debate.
Oh, really?
The European Fatwa Council has ruled that the necessity of home ownership for families might permit conventional mortgages under certain circumstances.
Oh, wow. Right.
So it's not as simple as just saying all interest is bad.
Right.
It's recognizing the complexity of applying these principles in a world where interest is just so deeply ingrained.
And it gets even, I think, more complicated when you think about everyday things like car loans, credit cards, student loans.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, it feels almost impossible to avoid interest completely.
Right. And the source acknowledges that, ideally a loan is an act of generosity, right?
Right.
One person helping another with no expectation of profit.
I love that ideal. It just seems very far from the reality of how things work.
It does, but the point is that even though we're operating within a system that's not ideal, we can still strive to minimize our reliance on interest.
Right.
So, for example, with credit cards, pay those balances off as quickly as possible.
Don't let that debt pile up,
Oh.
especially with those crazy interest rates.
Absolutely. And then when it comes to things like student loans, education is essential, but it can come with a hefty price tag. So if getting that education is deemed necessary and there's truly no interest-free options available, then student loans might be permissible.
So it's about weighing the necessity against the potential harm of engaging with an interest-based system.
Exactly. And it always comes back to that intention. Are we taking on this debt out of necessity with a plan to minimize it, to repay it responsibly, or are we just kind of falling into this cycle of debt?
That could lead to financial and spiritual harm.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's dig a little deeper into this prohibition on riba. Why is interest so problematic from an Islamic perspective?
Yeah.
It's not just a rule, right? There's a deeper reason.
Right. It's about the ethics of it.
Yeah.
So the source was pointing out that riba often goes hand in hand with exploitation. When someone's desperate for money, charging them interest can be incredibly harmful.
It's almost predatory, right?
Exactly. And they even they make this interesting parallel to the 2008 financial crisis.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, remember what happened back then? Banks were giving out these risky mortgages knowing people couldn't afford them, and it led to this massive collapse.
And you're saying that has a connection to the prohibition on riba?
Well, the source argues that the crisis was partly a consequence of this interest-based system gone haywire. It's like a modern example of what the Quran warned about centuries ago when it condemned those who devour people's wealth in falsehood.
So these ancient principles are speaking to very, very modern problems.
Oh, absolutely.
That's really interesting. And it makes you think if so many wise people throughout history have condemned this practice of interest, maybe there's a deeper ethical principle at play here that we need to pay attention to.
Exactly. It's not just some arbitrary rule.
Right. Okay, so that kind of leads to another question, which is how do you build an Islamic financial ecosystem in a world where conventional banking is so dominant, especially when Muslims in the West face so many challenges?
Right. Yeah. And the conversation brings up, the disturbing trend of bank account closures.
Yeah.
These payment processing shutdowns that target Muslim organizations.
It feels like there's a real attempt to shut down these organizations based on really unfounded accusations. And it makes self-reliance within the Muslim community that much more important.
Absolutely, yeah. So the source points to the example of Al Rashi Bank in Saudi Arabia. This is a successful Islamic bank. But then it goes even further and says, well, what about cryptocurrencies? What about Bitcoin?
Oh, yeah, right. The whole Bitcoin thing.
Yeah, it talks about Bitcoin specifically as a potential alternative to traditional banking.
Yeah.
Because it's decentralized. It's not controlled by any government or financial institution.
Right. So, if Muslim organizations are having their bank accounts shut down for whatever reason, Bitcoin offers a way to bypass that system.
Yeah, that's the idea. However, it's very clear that even with crypto, we have to proceed with caution.
Mm-hmm.
There are criteria for determining whether or not it aligns with Islamic principles. Real-world use cases, deflationary mechanisms. It's not just a free-for-all.
It's not just about jumping on the tech trend.
Right.
It's about, really critically evaluating it through the lens of Islam.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's a lot to consider there. Now, since we're on the topic of navigating this complex world of finance, let's talk about investing. How can Muslims invest in stocks, ETFs, mutual funds, in a way that aligns with their faith?
Yeah, so the source material introduces this concept of the AOPI standard. This has become kind of the the gold standard for ethical investing from an Islamic perspective.
Yeah.
And it involves a two-tier screening process.
Two-tier, okay.
So you have the qualitative and you have the quantitative.
All right, break that down for me.
All right, so first, the qualitative, you're looking at what the company actually does.
Okay.
Are their products and services halal?
So no investing in companies that are like, making money from alcohol or gambling.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just the products and services.
Mm-hmm.
So once they've passed that test, then you go to the quantitative screening. So now you're looking at the financials of the company.
Okay.
And there are three key things that this AOPI standard looks at. Liquidity of assets, debt-to-equity ratio, and permissible thresholds for haram income.
All right, I think I need some help understanding these. What is liquidity of assets?
So liquidity of assets is essentially how easily an asset can be converted to cash. So for example, cash itself is very liquid.
Right.
But something like, a piece of real estate, that takes a lot longer to sell.
Okay, I got it.
So the AOPI standard suggests that a company's liquid assets should be less than 50% of their total assets.
And why is that important from an Islamic perspective?
So it's about ensuring that the company's primary business is not financial speculation, which can be tricky in terms of avoiding riba. So you want to be investing in companies that are producing real goods and services.
Okay, so I need to look beyond the numbers, understand what a company's actually doing with its money.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it. What about that debt-to-equity ratio? That sounds kind of intimidating.
Don't worry, it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay, good.
Essentially, it's a measure of how much debt a company has compared to its overall value.
Okay.
So the AOPI standard suggests a ratio of less than 33%, which is actually derived from a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad said that exceeding 1/3 in debt can be problematic.
Wow, that's amazing. So these ancient teachings are giving us guidance even for our modern financial decisions. Absolutely.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah. And lastly, we have this permissible threshold for haram income. This deals with companies that might have some questionable income mixed in with their halal activities.
Okay, so if a company mainly sells halal food products, but also has a small side business selling alcohol.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
So the AOPI standard allows for up to 5% of a company's income to come from sources that might be considered questionable.
Okay, so it's not about expecting absolute purity from every investment, but it's about setting some reasonable limits.
Right. And even when a company falls within that 5% threshold, any dividends or capital gains you earn from that investment, you should purify those.
Hold on, purify. What does that mean in this context?
So you would donate a portion of that income to charity, essentially offsetting any potential benefit you might have derived from that haram part of their business. Okay, that makes sense. It's about being responsible with your wealth, making sure it's used for good, even if it came from a source that wasn't entirely pure.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's acknowledging that the world is not perfect. We sometimes have to navigate those gray areas.
Right, absolutely. And thankfully, technology is making it easier for us to do that.
Oh, okay.
The source talks about these apps.
Oh, tell me about these apps. What are they called? Because honestly, sometimes sifting through all this financial data is just overwhelming.
Right. So some popular ones are Zoya, Islamically, and Muslim Exchange. These apps can help you analyze stocks, ETFs, mutual funds.
Oh, cool.
And see if they align with Islamic principles.
So no more spending hours poring over financial reports.
Right.
And trying to figure out what's halal and what's not.
Exactly.
I'm downloading those. Okay, so that's super helpful. So we've talked about avoiding what's haram, but I think it's important to also talk about actively seeking out opportunities to use our wealth for good, right? Which leads to one of the most powerful concepts, I think, in Islamic finance, Isak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I have to admit, even though it's one of the 5 pillars of Islam, sometimes I don't really fully grasp its significance in the bigger picture of wealth.
Right. And the source talks about how it's more than just a religious obligation. It's a transformative practice.
Mm-hmm.
It's about recognizing that our wealth is not just for our own benefit. It's a means to uplift our communities, to address social needs.
Yeah, it's about sharing the wealth. And I remember the source material mentioned some pretty staggering numbers.
Yes. Yeah. It estimates that Muslims donate somewhere between $200 billion to $600 billion annually through zakat.
That's an insane amount of money.
Yeah.
Imagine the potential if it were like, properly utilized.
Exactly. And the source talks about this, about shifting from a culture of dependency to one of empowerment. It's not just about handouts. It's about sustainable solutions to poverty
Right.
and other challenges.
It's about, like, instead of just giving someone a fish, you teach them how to fish.
Exactly. It's about creating a more just and equitable society. And there's actually a powerful hadith about this.
Tell me.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, swore by Allah that giving charity does not decrease wealth.
Right.
In fact, it can increase it through barakah, blessings.
So it's not a zero-sum game. Like, giving doesn't deplete your wealth. It can actually multiply it.
Yeah, through Allah's blessings.
That's a really powerful concept.
Yeah.
So it challenges us to, like, rethink our whole relationship with money, right? Are we clinging to it out of fear and scarcity? Or are we trusting in Allah's abundance and using our wealth to make a difference?
Exactly. It really is. And it makes you think, if Islamic finance can offer solutions to problems that have plagued the conventional financial system for so long, maybe there's something here that can benefit everyone.
Regardless of faith.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with. The relationship between wealth and spirituality. It's almost like there's this assumption that you can't be both wealthy and spiritually fulfilled.
Yeah, and the conversation really pushes back on that. Like, many of the Prophet Muhammad's companions were actually quite wealthy.
Oh, okay. So having wealth wasn't seen as an obstacle
No.
to spiritual growth.
It all comes down to how that wealth is acquired and how it's used.
Okay.
The conversation really emphasizes that you should be seeking wealth for the right reasons, not out of greed, not out of a desire for status, but as a means to provide for your family, support your community, contribute to worthy causes.
So it's about aligning your financial goals with your spiritual aspiration.
I love that. Yeah, and it cautions against allowing wealth to become an idol. Something that consumes your thoughts and dictates your actions.
Right, because ultimately true fulfillment doesn't come from material possessions.
Right.
It comes from our relationship with Allah.
Exactly. It uses this really powerful analogy. It says, wealth is like a mirror. If your heart is pure, your wealth will reflect that purity. But if your heart is corrupt, your wealth will amplify that corruption.
Wow, that's a really powerful image. So it's not about demonizing wealth. It's about recognizing the potential for both good and bad.
Exactly, yeah. And being aware of the potential pitfalls, right? Arrogance, stinginess, disconnect from those who are less fortunate. Remembering that ultimately our wealth is a test.
From Allah.
Yeah, a trial that can bring us closer to Him or lead us astray.
So are there any, like, practical tips on how to cultivate a healthy relationship with wealth?
Absolutely. The conversation talks about the importance of gratitude.
Okay.
You know, when we appreciate what we have, we're less likely to be consumed by a desire for more.
Right. It's about shifting our focus from what we lack to what we've been blessed with.
Exactly. Being mindful of the source of our wealth. Everything comes from Allah.
It's about humility, right? Remembering that our blessings are gifts, not entitlements.
Exactly. And that humility naturally leads to generosity. It talks about sharing our wealth, not just through zakat, but through voluntary acts of kindness as well.
And there's that hadith, right, about, like, the best of you are those who are best to your families.
Absolutely.
And that includes providing for them.
Financially, yes.
Right.
Taking care of our family is a religious obligation, but it's also a way to express our love and gratitude.
So finding that balance between fulfilling our responsibilities to our families, but also looking outward and recognizing the needs of our community.
Exactly, yeah. And it's about those everyday decisions, being mindful of our spending, avoiding extravagance and waste.
Living within our means, being content with what we have.
Yeah, and using our wealth to make a positive impact.
Okay, so we talked about some of the potential pitfalls of wealth, gratitude, generosity, but what about, are there any spiritual benefits to being financially stable?
Absolutely. So when you're financially secure, you're less burdened by worry and stress.
Makes sense.
And that frees up your mental, your emotional energy for spiritual pursuit.
Right. It's easier to focus on, like, prayer and contemplation and acts of worship when you're not constantly
stressed about money.
Yeah.
And that peace of mind can also make you more generous. It's easier to give to others when you're not constantly worried about your own finances. And financial stability can open doors to pursuing knowledge.
Which is essential, right?
Your spiritual growth, yes.
Yeah.
So it can be a powerful tool for spiritual liberation. It allows us to focus on what matters, cultivating that relationship with the law, fulfilling our purpose.
It's not about seeing wealth as an end in itself, but as a means to a higher end.
Exactly. I love that. And this whole conversation about financial freedom and empowerment made me think about all the amazing innovations that are happening.
Like Islamic fintech, right?
Islamic fintech, yeah. All these apps and platforms that are making it easier than ever for Muslims to manage their finances in a way that aligns with their faith.
It's like technology is catching up to the principles of Islamic finance and making it so much more like accessible.
Right, yeah.
And convenient for everyone.
And there's this huge potential for financial inclusion, reaching underserved communities, empowering them to participate in the economy in a way that's both ethical and accessible.
So it's not just about catering to those who are already wealthy. It's about creating opportunities for everyone.
Exactly.
To benefit.
Yeah.
Okay, but even with all these innovations, I think there's still a question that's on a lot of people's minds. Insurance. I know it's a way to manage risk, but there's always those whispers about, certain aspects of it being haram.
Right. It's a great question, and the source actually addresses this directly.
Okay, good.
Conventional insurance can have elements that clash with Islamic principles.
Like what? What kinds of things?
So some types of insurance can resemble gambling. You're betting that something bad's going to happen, and if it doesn't, the insurance company keeps your money. So that's problematic. And then there's the issue of interest. The way insurance companies invest their funds might involve interest.
So does that mean all insurance is off limits?
Not necessarily. The source really emphasizes that it depends on the type of insurance, the terms of the contract.
Okay.
Some forms like life insurance are generally considered permissible, while others, like conventional car insurance, might be more problematic.
Okay, so how do you know which is which?
The key is to do your research, consult with scholars, and thankfully there are providers that specialize in Sharia-compliant products.
Okay, that's really good to know. I think a lot of people just assume that insurance is like this necessary evil and don't even realize that there might be halal alternatives.
Yeah, it's about being informed and empowered to make choices that align with our values. And that brings me to something that I'm really passionate about: financial literacy within the Muslim community.
Yes, financial literacy is huge. I feel like I'm always talking about this.
It's so important, The more we understand about how money works, the better equipped we are to manage our finances responsibly, make those informed decisions, avoid those predatory practices.
And the source material emphasizes the importance of education.
Yeah, it encourages Muslims to be proactive, to read books, attend workshops, consult with experts. There are so many resources out there that can help us understand personal finance, investing, Islamic financial principles.
It's about taking control of your own financial destiny, not just blindly following what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. And it's never too early to start. Financial literacy is a lifelong journey.
Yeah, it's like learning any other essential life skill. The sooner you start, the better off you'll be. And speaking of essential life skills, the source material touches on a topic that I think a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
Muslims and non-Muslims alike. Debt.
It's a heavy burden.
Yeah.
Both financially and emotionally.
It can really take a toll on your mental health.
Absolutely. Just that constant stress, worry about money. So the source offers some practical advice for managing debt. First and foremost, avoid it if you don't need it, and then prioritize those repayments.
So living within your means. Creating a budget.
Yeah.
Having a plan.
Exactly. Yep. And it highlights the spiritual benefit of being debt-free.
Yeah, it's not just about the financial freedom. It's that peace of mind.
Right, knowing you're not burdened by that debt.
Yeah.
And it can strengthen your connection with Allah. When you're not preoccupied with those worries, you have more space.
For spiritual growth.
Exactly. And that freedom can lead to even greater blessings. There's a story in the source about a man struggling financially, and he went to the Prophet Muhammad for advice, and the Prophet said, "Seek refuge from debt."
Oh, interesting.
So this idea that debt can be a barrier to receiving those blessings. And it goes on to say that the man followed that advice, and within a short time, his financial situation was completely transformed.
Wow.
So it shows the power of seeking guidance in all of our affairs, including our finances.
Yeah.
And it really highlights this interconnectedness of our spiritual and financial well-being.
Now, this conversation takes a turn that I found really inspiring, which is the role of entrepreneurship in Islam. I know a lot of young Muslims are really interested in, starting businesses. What does the source have to say about that?
It's super encouraging. It points out that the Prophet Muhammad himself was a successful businessman, and he praised those who engage in honest trade and commerce.
So starting a business isn't just seen as permissible, it's actually encouraged.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a way to create jobs, contribute to the economy, provide for yourself, your family, and ultimately use your talents to benefit society.
It's about creating value, right?
Exactly.
And the source material specifically says to explore those entrepreneurial talents. Like use your skills to create halal businesses that benefit your communities.
Yeah, it's about channeling that entrepreneurial spirit into something that's not just profitable, but aligned with your values.
It's about building a business that reflects your faith, not just your ambition.
I love that.
Yeah.
Recognizing that our businesses are not just about making money, they're a reflection of who we are, what we stand for.
And that leads to another important, I think, aspect of Islamic finance that's often overlooked, the role of women.
Yeah, women have always played such a vital role in Islamic history and society, but their contributions to Islamic finance often go unrecognized.
Yeah, there's this stereotype, right, that finance is a man's world.
Exactly.
But the source material pushes back against that, highlighting the growing number of women, entrepreneurs, scholars, professionals who are really making their mark.
Yeah. Breaking down barriers, achieving success in a field that's traditionally been dominated by men. And, their perspectives are so valuable. They're bringing new ideas, new approaches, new energy to the field.
It's about recognizing that diversity is a strength.
Absolutely.
Not a weakness.
The more perspectives we have, the richer and more vibrant the Islamic finance industry will become.
Ultimately, that benefits everyone, right?
Yeah. When women thrive, communities thrive. The ummah thrives.
Now, this conversation turns to a topic that I think is becoming increasingly important, the role of Islamic finance in addressing those social and environmental challenges.
Absolutely. We're facing so many challenges in the world today. Poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation. The source argues that Islamic finance principles are uniquely suited to addressing these challenges.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So Islamic finance is inherently ethical, right?
Yeah.
Based on justice, fairness, compassion, sustainability. So it naturally lends itself to investments that have a positive social and environmental impact.
So things like renewable energy, affordable housing, sustainable agriculture.
Absolutely. Recognizing that our financial decisions have consequences that extend far beyond our own personal gain. They can either contribute to the problems we face, or they can be part of the solution.
It's about aligning our investments with our values.
Exactly. And the source highlights this growing movement within Islamic finance to channel those investments towards projects that have that positive social and environmental impact.
So it's about recognizing that our well-being, our financial well-being, is connected to the well-being of the planet.
Absolutely.
Of all its inhabitants.
Yeah. We can't have one without the other. And it's remembering that concept of khilafa, right? Stewardship. We're not just owners of this earth, we're caretakers.
Yeah, it's about shifting our mindset from extraction to regeneration, from exploitation to sustainability.
Exactly. And Islamic finance offers a framework for doing just that.
Okay, so before we go any further, I think it's important to address a question that I think comes up a lot when people are first learning about Islamic finance. What's the difference between Islamic finance and conventional finance?
Yeah, it's a fundamental question, and the source is very clear on this. At its core, Islamic finance is about aligning your financial decisions with Islamic principles.
So it's not just about avoiding specific products or services like interest-bearing loans or investing in haram industries.
Right. It's much deeper than that. It's adopting a different mindset.
Okay. So what does that different mindset look like?
It's about seeing money as a tool for good, for building a more just and equitable world. It's recognizing that our wealth is a trust from Allah, that we will be held accountable for how we use it, prioritizing ethical conduct, risk sharing, social responsibility in all of our dealings.
It's a much more holistic approach to finance.
Absolutely. And what's amazing is that these principles are not just beneficial for Muslims. They can benefit anyone, regardless of faith or background.
It's about creating a financial system that's more just, more equitable, more sustainable for everyone.
Exactly. And that's why education is so important. We need to raise awareness about these principles, make this knowledge accessible.
Yeah. The source mentions Islamic finance courses
Mm.
and programs in schools and universities
Absolutely.
and community centers.
Yeah.
Like making this knowledge available.
Empowering individuals to make those informed financial decisions, building a more robust Islamic financial ecosystem.
Yeah. The more people understand it, the more it can like grow and flourish
Exactly.
and contribute to a better world.
Yeah, it's about planting those seeds
Mm-hmm.
of knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and watching them blossom into a more just ethical financial future.
And it's never too early to start planting those seeds.
Absolutely.
We should be teaching our children about Islamic finance,
Absolutely.
about financial responsibility,
Yeah.
ethical conduct, generosity.
Instilling those values from a young age. And it's not just about lectures and textbooks. We need to lead by example.
Right. Walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. Talk to them about money, about the choices we make, the challenges we face.
Make those conversations about money normal,
Yeah.
part of like family life.
Exactly. Empowering them to make smart decisions, understand the difference between needs and wants, to save, to use their money for good.
It's giving them the tools and the knowledge to be financially responsible and spiritually fulfilled.
Absolutely. Yeah. Teaching our children about Islamic finance is an investment in their future and an investment in the future of our community.
Yeah. It's planting those seeds for a brighter future for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, this conversation about raising financially responsible children makes me think about the challenges of maintaining a halal income.
Right.
In today's world, it's not always easy.
It's not. And the source acknowledges this, right? Many industries, professions, have elements that might be considered questionable.
Like what kind of things?
So they talk specifically about media, advertising, entertainment.
Yeah, those industries can be tricky.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure to compromise your values, to do things that might not necessarily align
Absolutely.
with Islamic principles.
So the source encourages Muslims to be mindful of the source of their income, to seek halal alternatives whenever possible.
But sometimes those alternatives are hard to find.
They can be. The conversation acknowledges that. And it says, look, we're doing our best, being mindful, seeking guidance when needed.
Trusting in Allah's mercy.
Yeah, exactly. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right. And it's recognizing that we're all on a journey. We're going to make mistakes along the way.
Absolutely. The key is to keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to align those actions with our values.
Now, this conversation shifts to a really inspiring topic, which is the potential of the Muslim Ummah to make a positive impact on the world.
Yeah, a really powerful vision. The source highlights that Muslims represent a significant portion of the global population, control a vast amount of wealth.
So we have the numbers, we have the resources, but do we have the vision? Do we have the will?
To use them effectively, that's the question, right?
Yeah.
The source challenges us to think about what we could achieve if we truly united and harnessed those resources for good.
I mean, imagine the impact we could have on poverty, on hunger, on disease, injustice.
Absolutely. It's a vision that's inspiring, but also challenging, requires a shift in mindset, willingness to move beyond our differences, work together for that common good.
It's about recognizing that our individual success is tied to the success of the Ummah.
Of the Ummah, yeah, exactly. And remembering that Islam calls us to be leaders, to be beacons of light in a world that's often shrouded in darkness.
Yeah, it's a call to action.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that we have a responsibility to use our resources, our talents, our wealth to make a positive difference.
And Islamic finance can be that tool for achieving that goal, providing a framework for ethical conduct, social responsibility, sustainable development.
It's about like recognizing that we have a choice. We can either contribute to these problems through our financial decisions, or we can be a part of the solution.
And that choice is ours.
So let's get practical.
Yeah.
What are some strategies, some things we can do to increase our risk, our sustenance, in a way that's aligned with Islamic principles?
So the source talks about this, and it says, look, it's a combination of physical and spiritual means.
Okay, break that down for me. What are the physical means?
So the physical means are things like hard work, education, networking. These are essential for success in any field.
Yeah, putting in the effort.
Exactly. But it's not just about working hard. It's about working smart.
Right.
Seeking knowledge, developing our skills, building those relationships.
Okay, what about the spiritual means?
The spiritual means are just as important. Prayer, charity, seeking Allah's blessings.
It's about recognizing that our success is ultimately in Allah's hands, but but we have a role to play.
Exactly. Striking that balance between effort and surrender,
Mm-hmm.
action and trust.
Doing our part and trusting that Allah will take care of the rest.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes having a positive mindset, believing in yourself and your ability to achieve those goals.
Having that faith.
Mm-hmm. Faith in yourself, faith in your abilities, and faith in Allah's plan.
Yeah. And being persistent, right? Not giving up
Absolutely.
easily, even when things get tough.
Setbacks are a part of the journey. They often lead to even greater blessings.
Having that grit, that determination to keep going.
Yeah, and surrounding yourself with positive and supportive people.
Building a community of support, people who will believe in you, who will encourage you along the way.
Exactly. And seeking out mentors,
Mm-hmm.
role models, people who have achieved success, who can guide you.
Yeah, recognizing that we don't have to figure everything out on our own.
Absolutely.
There are people who have paved the way.
Yeah.
And who are willing to share their knowledge.
And that willingness to share, to give back, is also a part of increasing our risk. Be givers, not just takers.
Using our resources, our talents, our wealth to benefit others.
Exactly. And recognizing that risk is not just about material wealth. It's about our overall well-being, our physical, emotional, and spiritual health.
Yeah. Living a life of purpose, of meaning, a life that's pleasing to Allah.
Yeah, and that brings us to another important concept. Time management.
Oh, yes. Time management, that elusive skill.
The source talks about how time is one of our most valuable assets, and we should be using it wisely.
It's so easy to get, caught up in the busyness of life, to feel like you're constantly just running from one thing to the next.
Absolutely.
So the source encourages us to, prioritize our tasks. Focus on what's important. Avoid wasting time.
Exactly. Being intentional,
Yeah.
what matters most, and making sure we're spending our time accordingly.
It's recognizing that our time is a gift from Allah, and that will be accountable for how we use it.
And when you use it wisely, you attract barakah.
Ah, yes. Barakah,
Right.
those blessings.
The source reminds us that that's a force that can increase our risk in ways we might not imagine.
So it's not just about working hard and managing our time. It's about attracting Allah's blessings.
Absolutely. And there are actions that attract barakah. Being grateful, being generous, using your wealth for those righteous purposes.
So it's aligning our actions with our intentions, making sure that our pursuit of risk is motivated by a desire to please Allah.
Exactly, yeah. And they highlight seeking knowledge. The more we learn about Islam, the more we understand Allah's plan, the more we can align our lives with His will.
Knowledge is key.
Absolutely. And it can help us make those wise financial decisions.
Okay, so let's talk about some more practical tips for managing finances effectively.
Okay, so the source emphasizes budgeting.
Oh, budgeting. That's a word that makes some people cringe. It feels so restrictive.
I know, right? But the source actually presents it in a really positive light.
Okay.
It's not about depriving yourself. It's about being intentional with your money, making those conscious choices that align with your values, your goals.
No, it's about taking control rather than letting our finances control us.
Exactly, yeah. And it starts with tracking your income and expenses.
Okay.
Where's your money coming from? Where's it going? Once you have a clear picture, you can start making those informed decisions.
So creating a budget is like creating a roadmap for our financial journey.
I love that, yeah. It helps you stay on track, avoid that overspending, make sure you're prioritizing those needs over wants.
Yeah. And I think the source material also talks about avoiding unnecessary debt and developing a savings plan.
Absolutely. Living within our means, making sure you're setting aside some money for the future.
And diversifying our investments.
Yes. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yeah.
Invest in a variety of assets, stocks, real estate, precious metals. This helps to mitigate risk and protect our wealth.
So being smart.
And strategic with those financial decisions. Exactly. And speaking of being smart and strategic, the source also talks about inheritance.
Ah, yeah.
A bit of a sensitive topic.
Yeah. It's something that I think a lot of people don't really like to talk about.
It can be a little awkward,
Mm-hmm.
but it's important. And Islamic law provides clear guidelines for how it should be handled.
Yeah, and the source emphasizes having a valid will in place.
Absolutely. A will outlines how your assets should be distributed among your heirs.
After your death.
Yes, exactly. And make sure it complies with those Islamic guidelines.
Right.
The source encourages us to seek professional advice. To make sure it's valid, it reflects our wishes.
It's being responsible, making sure that our loved ones are taken care of after we're gone.
Exactly. And being mindful of the needs of our dependents, our children, our spouses. It's a way to ensure that our legacy benefits them, even after we're gone. Powerful concept. It reminds us that our wealth is not just for our own benefit. It's for future generations.
Now, this conversation kind of takes a turn to discuss the challenges of maintaining a halal lifestyle in this consumerist society that we live in.
It's not easy. We're constantly bombarded with messages to buy things we don't need, upgrade our lifestyles, keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, it feels like you're on this treadmill constantly chasing after the next shiny object.
Exactly. So the source encourages us to be mindful of those messages. Resist that temptation to overspend. Focus on what truly matters.
Yeah, remembering that true happiness doesn't come from material possessions.
Right.
It comes from, our relationship with Allah, our families, our communities.
Our purpose.
Our purpose.
Yeah.
Exactly. Finding that contentment in what we have. Using our resources wisely to create a life that's meaningful and fulfilling.
So how do we resist that temptation? To overspend?
Yeah, the source gives a couple of practical tips. First, it says prioritize your needs over your wants.
What do you truly need to live a comfortable and fulfilling life? And what are those extras that you can do without?
Right, separating those essentials from the non-essentials.
Exactly. Be mindful of your spending habits. Where's your money going? Are you spending impulsively? Are you buying things to impress others? Or are you making conscious choices?
Yeah. It's about taking that step back and being like, do I really need this?
Exactly. And if the answer is no, walk away.
Easier said than done sometimes.
I know. But it gets easier. It does. And it helps to remember every dollar you spend is a vote for the kind of world you want to create. So support those ethical businesses, sustainable practices, companies that align with your values.
Using our purchasing power to make a positive impact.
Exactly. And remembering that a simple halal lifestyle can be much more fulfilling than a life of luxury and extravagance.
It's about finding that contentment in what you have, focusing on those things that truly matter.
Exactly.
Our faith, our families, our communities.
Our purpose.
Our purpose. Yeah. And that brings us to another practical challenge, which is avoiding riba in our financial transactions.
It can be sneaky. It can hide in places you might not expect.
Yeah, give me some examples. What are some of the unexpected places where riba might be lurking?
So late payment fees, overdraft charges, some types of loyalty programs.
Wow, I wouldn't have even thought about those.
It's about reading that fine print, asking questions, making sure that those transactions are truly riba-free.
So being an informed consumer, being proactive, and being willing to walk away.
From those deals that don't align with your values.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's about supporting Islamic financial institutions.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There are banks, credit unions, investment firms that are offering those halal alternatives to conventional products and services.
And they're becoming more and more accessible. It's really exciting to see this Islamic finance industry really growing.
It is.
And evolving.
To meet the needs of the community. And, speaking of meeting the needs of the community, the source material really highlights zakat and the role it plays in purifying our wealth.
Yeah, it's more than just a religious obligation. It's a spiritual practice that can transform our relationship with wealth.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that our wealth is a gift from Allah, that we have a responsibility to use it in a way that benefits others.
Exactly. And the source emphasizes this, that giving zakat is not just about fulfilling a duty, it's about purifying our hearts. Drawing closer to Allah.
Right. And when we give it sincerely, with the intention of pleasing Allah,
He rewards us with barakah.
Yeah. It's like a spiritual investment.
Exactly.
Right. We give a portion of our wealth and Allah blesses us with even more.
And those blessings can manifest in so many ways. Increased risk, improved health, stronger relationships, peace of mind.
It's not just the material benefits, it's the spiritual benefits as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Zakat is a powerful tool for spiritual growth and for creating a more just and equitable society.
Okay, so we've talked about, giving zakat, but what are I think a lot of people are unsure about the practicalities. What are the ways we can give zakat?
So the source talks about giving to those who are most in need.
The poor, the needy.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But it also encourages us to support those charitable causes that align with our values.
So things like education, healthcare, community development.
Absolutely. Finding causes that resonate with you, that you feel passionate about supporting, and remembering that the amount you give is not as important as the intention behind the giving. You know, when you give with a sincere heart, a desire to please Allah, to benefit others, it becomes a source of immense reward.
It's recognizing that zakat is not just a transaction, it's an act of worship.
Beautifully said, yeah. And this whole conversation about using our wealth for good, you know, being entrepreneurial, innovative, reminded me of this concept of halal hustle.
Oh yeah, halal hustle. I've heard that term a lot lately.
Yeah, so it's about using our talents, our skills, to create businesses and generate income.
So it's like being entrepreneurial, but with a halal twist.
Exactly. It's being creative, innovative, hardworking, but also ethical, honest, fair in all of your dealings.
Building a business that reflects your values.
Yeah, and the source really encourages Muslims to embrace this spirit of halal hustle. It's a path to financial success and spiritual fulfillment.
It's about recognizing those talents and skills that Allah has given you and using them in a way that benefits others.
Exactly. Yeah.
So halal hustle isn't just about making money, it's about making a difference.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that difference can start with our everyday actions, the choices we make, even in the workplace.
Yeah. The workplace can be a challenging environment for Muslims.
Absolutely.
Especially when you're trying to maintain that halal lifestyle.
Yeah. Office gossip.
Yeah.
Inappropriate relationships.
The pressure to compromise.
Pressure to compromise.
It's your values.
Your values, right.
Yeah.
So what does the source material say about, like, navigating those challenges?
So it encourages Muslims to be mindful, be aware of your interactions, and avoid those situations that could lead to harm behavior.
Setting those boundaries. Knowing your limits.
Exactly. Not being afraid to say no,
Yeah.
but also speaking up when you see something wrong. When you witness something that goes against your principles.
Being that example.
Yeah, and seeking out workplaces that are supportive of your faith.
Right. Finding a place where you can thrive.
Yeah.
Professionally and spiritually.
Absolutely. Your work should be a source of both livelihood and spiritual fulfillment.
This conversation then goes back to this idea of Islamic finance contributing to a more just and equitable world, which is something that's really inspiring.
It is. And the source argues that these principles, you know, the risk sharing, the ethical conduct, the social responsibility, they align with those values of sustainability, fairness, and compassion.
It's about building a financial system that works for everyone.
Exactly.
Not just the privileged few.
Yeah. And they suggest that Islamic finance can be a powerful tool for addressing global challenges like poverty, inequality, and even climate change.
So it's not just about personal financial well-being. It's about collective well-being.
Yeah.
Creating a world where everyone has a chance to thrive.
It's a vision that's both ambitious and hopeful, and it challenges us to think beyond ourselves and to see our financial decisions as part of something much bigger.
Now, to achieve that kind of impact, I mean, the Islamic finance industry, it has to be dynamic. It can't be stuck in the past.
Right.
It has to embrace innovation.
Exactly, yeah. And the source highlights this, the role of technology in shaping the future. We've talked about fintech, but it goes beyond that. It's about being open to new ideas, new approaches, new ways of doing things.
It's about being innovative.
Yeah.
Finding those creative solutions.
Exactly.
And it specifically says Islamic financial institutions need to embrace technology, to collaborate, share knowledge, and develop new products and services that meet the evolving needs of the Muslim community.
Yeah, being forward-thinking, anticipating those future challenges, being prepared to adapt.
Yeah. The industry needs to be dynamic and innovative.
Absolutely.
To stay relevant and impactful in the 21st century. Okay, so we've talked a lot about like the big picture, but let's bring it back to the individual level. What are some things, some steps that we can take as individuals to align our finances with Islamic principles?
So the source really emphasizes education. It encourages Muslims to learn, read books, attend workshops, consult with those knowledgeable scholars.
It's about taking responsibility for our own decisions, not just blindly following what everyone else is doing.
Exactly.
And it's about taking action. It's not enough to just know the principles. we actually have to apply them
Yeah, absolutely.
to our lives.
Yeah.
So making changes to our habits, to our practices, switching to Islamic banking, avoiding riba, investing in halal businesses, giving zakat.
Exactly, making those conscious choices that reflect that commitment. And remembering that it's a journey, not a destination.
It's like anything else in our faith. It's a constant process
Yeah.
of learning and growth.
Exactly. And speaking of community and growth, the source brings up this point that Islamic finance isn't just about individual well-being, but it can actually foster a stronger sense of community.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, think about it, like risk sharing, profit sharing. These concepts encourage cooperation, collaboration, rather than that cutthroat competition.
So instead of everyone just being out for themselves.
It's about like working together, supporting each other,
Yeah.
and sharing those rewards.
Exactly. And that creates this powerful sense of unity and shared purpose.
Yeah, like we're all in this together,
Yeah.
working towards that common goal.
Absolutely. And it's not just about money. It's about building those relationships,
Yeah.
strengthening our communities, creating a more just and equitable society for all.
I love that. And it reminds me of something that really resonated with me from this conversation, which is the emphasis on seeking knowledge and guidance when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. It's so important, especially with, how complex the financial world is.
Yeah.
You can't just wing it.
Yeah.
We have to be informed. We have to be seeking that guidance.
So consulting with scholars, attending workshops,
Yeah.
reading books.
Absolutely. Being proactive, taking responsibility.
Be those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so this has been an incredible deep dive. We've covered so much.
We have, yeah. From the philosophical foundations to the practical steps that we can take. What really stood out to you from this conversation?
For me, it was that emphasis on intention. It's not just about following those rules. It's about understanding the why behind those rules, making sure our hearts are in the right place.
Yeah. It's about making these financial decisions an act of worship,
Exactly.
a way to draw closer to Allah.
And remembering that our wealth is a gift, a trust that we're responsible for using wisely.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought-provoking question from the source material. It says, if even 2.5% of the world's wealth held by Muslims were effectively utilized, could we eradicate poverty?
Wow. It's a question that challenges us to really think about the potential we have, the responsibility we have to use our resources for good.
It's a reminder that Islamic finance is not just about personal gain. It's about collective well-being, a vision for a more just and equitable world for all.
The vision that we can all contribute to.
One halal dollar at a time.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the world of Islamic finance. We hope it's been insightful, it's been inspiring. And remember, the journey towards aligning our finances with our faith is ongoing. So keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to make a positive difference in the world. Until next time.